This video is about anger. I want to do a healing for anger and also a description of hot and cold anger. So, nature of anger is to cut or destroy. However, a surgeon's knife cuts, but it cuts with discrimination and measured regularity. And the result is that lives are saved. A bomb, on the other hand, takes out everything in its wake. So, to wield anger like a surgeon's knife rather than a bomb, the fundamental key is to own it. That's the fundamental key. One needs to accept, recognize, get comfortable with the fact that anger is part of the human condition, and the approach is one of the witness. Because if we approach anger from any other angle, for instance, if we approach it by saying, well, you know, that doesn't really bother the head. The head says, well, that didn't really bother me. And the heart's like, oh, yeah, it really bothered me. It really bothered me a lot. You know, then what happens is the anger gets kind of pushed off to the side, and the head is the driver. And when the anger gets pushed off to the side, it's a lot like trying to hold a beach ball underwater, which is getting continuously more full of air. So the head's going, no, it's okay. It's okay. It's not bothering me. It's not bothering me. It's not bothering me. And then it explodes. And everybody feels crummy. So avoidance is not the thing to do. How do we accept? How do we accept? How can we take this energy, which is very uncomfortable and destructive, and organize ourselves so that the presence of anger ultimately serves evolution? That's the goal. So it comes down to self-acceptance. Looking into the field of the collective, finding awareness, gently falling into the space of the ancestral archive. Because this is one of those little challenges that's been carried not just for one generation, but for multiple generations. Our ancestors have grappled with the approach to anger and how to best deal with anger. Self-acceptance is at the foundation. Definition of self is under that. So we're going down to definition of self. Definition of self as the manifestation or expression of wholeness, the antenna of the universe. The whole universe has an antenna, and the antenna is looking at the universe, right? And we are, each one of us is that antenna. I'm feeling an activation and a kind of a culmination or collecting of energy at the solar plexus area, and definitely between the navel and the solar plexus, right in that area. There seems to be a hot spot, seems to be a spot. So that is one of the spots where people tend to bury their anger. Oh, good. All right, so attention right there. So we're going to go in with our safety goggles and our oxygen tanks and everything that we need to address that hot spot on behalf of all the ancestors. No, not all the ancestors, just going back about 10,000 years. Lots of forgiveness is rolling. The heart area, the finest level of feeling, is producing those waves of forgiveness to move into that hot spot area. So what's going on in that area? We often use inference and energy healing to determine what the body is doing. So the area between the navel and the solar plexus is the area where the creative energies, which are the second chakra energies, interface with power, which is the third chakra energy. So right in that interface between the creative intentions and desires and dreams and wishes and visions and the gathering of resources. We can think of the power as the resource to promote the manifestation of that vision. Right there, that's a seed. I'm seeing impressions which are clearing. As I see them, awareness goes in, and what awareness does is it brings resolution and completion wherever it goes. So it's getting into those impressions from the past, impressions of disappointment, loss, lack of fulfillment, incompletions. And so that is the first thing that's establishing. The other thing that's happening in that area is, as I mentioned, forgiveness. One of the things that complicates the ability to feel comfortable when things don't work out the way a person has planned them is that it seems as if there's always a reflection back on oneself. Oh, well, because I failed. Oh, there's something wrong with me. Or pointing it at someone else, but the whole universe is the self. So even if we point the finger in another direction, it still comes back to oneself. So anyway. There is a subtle organ in the physiology, which I use the word superconscious just because I kind of picked that up about a decade ago and never put it down. But it really means the part of consciousness, the part of you, which is self-loving, self-accepting, self-understanding, self-recognizing, self-protecting, those qualities. It is that part. And it's a very important, such an important part of a person's makeup that it tends to range from the very finest level of the physiology all the way up to the densest level, all the way up to the full manifest level. And that structure has been damaged for some people, has been damaged over the course of time. It can always stand to be a little stronger, a little more integrated, robust. So what I'm noticing here is that structure, the superconscious, the part that protects and loves you, the part of you that protects and loves you, is right at the fine, fine junction between that structure and the source of creation. There are little connections, little threads, little very, very tender. This is a tender movement of the consciousness, of the physiology, making the important connections between that part of oneself and the source of creation. It feels like a mother rocking their baby to sleep or something like that. It feels like a mother holding a child. It's just like that. It's such a tender connection. And the connection has a little bit of movement in it. So there's like a connection. It's like there's a little rocking back and forth between this aspect of self that recognizes and loves and fully understands who and what you are in your completion, in your divine expression, divine glory, and then the source of creation. And right there in that little movement, there's activation of energy that creates a feeling of joy. So the healing itself, the movement itself, is a very sweet, kind of joyful, blissful, soft, gentle, comforting movement. And that movement is taking place right there in the area between the navel and the solar plexus. And it's just holding, the movement's just kind of sitting in there, just kind of rocking. The tool that we need, the most important tool for using anger in a way which promotes evolution, is truth. And truth is the tool of right action. So when any situation arises that elicits an anger response, bringing a broader perspective, a complete perspective, supports the ability to step back and promote speech and action. It creates speech and action in a way which is good for everybody in the situation, in a way which results in the transformation that everybody most wants in the depths of their hearts. Anytime anger rises up, it's an indication that something isn't right. So rather than try to avoid or deny or bury that feeling, it's good to ask oneself, this is something you can do. You can ask yourself, what is the seed of this anger? What is the really deep core foundation of this angry feeling? And I can tell you right now, it's not somebody else's fault or the fault of a situation. When the anger has been sitting a long time in the being, unattended, and the nature of humans is to not want to deal with a situation until it's time to deal with the situation. We experience life in a sequential unfoldment of moments, right? So there can be an old, dark element inside oneself that needs growth and needs transformation and needs healing. But as long as we're dealing with other things on the surface, we can't get to it. But eventually the time comes that that deeper stress needs to be addressed. And when that happens, if one is not in the habit of addressing that stress, then it can require like a little kickstart to get one to jump on it. So what will happen if a person's in the habit of not looking, in the habit of avoiding, then the environment brings up a situation or circumstance which creates or elicits an angry response. And it's like it takes a thorn to remove a thorn. That angry response to that rude thing that somebody said, or having to wait in line forever, or I sent this important letter to someone and the mail lost it, or something, whatever that is, whatever that unfortunate experience was, that it's not the fault of the post office, and it's not the fault of the other person. It's just that condition arose to point awareness internally. We point awareness inside when the feeling of anger arises. And then from the perspective of this angry feeling is my angry feeling that I own and I'm looking at it, then the awareness will bring the precise foundation to that angry feeling. And it could be some experience from very distant past. And a lot of times people find that the stresses that are sitting very deep in there, especially if you're watching this, you're a long time, most likely you've been doing this for some time and you're interested in self-development. So a lot of times the seed of an imbalance, it can sit in a remote location of self. It can be some very, very deep old impression from some long distant past, or it could be something that was passed down from ancestors for generations. Looking to the ancestors. For the ancestors, integration of heart and head. Because this is where that deep area of first of all, the deep area of the gut is where, when awareness is there, we have a kind of a witnessing perspective on our reality, because the head is where we interface with reality directly. But from a deeper level, kind of a whole body awareness, we can experience the reality from the perspective of a broadest possible perspective. Whole body awareness, broadest possible perspective. And as I'm saying that, there's some activation and alignment in people's chords of life to help stabilize that ability to maintain a whole body awareness on a regular, consistent basis. Then for the ancestors, what I'm getting is the questions coming from the ancestral archive here, which is, well, yeah, but what about being polite or right action, that sometimes it's not necessarily appropriate to come forward with the truth or to present the whole picture, because society dictates that some things are appropriate to speak about and some things aren't. That's absolutely true, that society has all sorts of dictates, but with a small amount of creativity, and that's why we did the healing for the area between the navel and the solar plexus, with just some application of creativity, it is possible to present the truth in a way in which everyone understands it without offending. And the principle that's coming up right here is the ability to utilize both speech and silence. There are two aspects of communication. There are two aspects of language. There is the spoken and gestural language of our world and the whole creation, and there is the language of silence. When the truth is present in the silence, then even a small word or a small gesture is sufficient to convey the message. So it's not necessary to blast a person or hit them over the head necessarily. If you have a boundary, and healthy boundaries are necessary and appropriate for everyone, everyone must have healthy boundaries, then it can be enough sometimes just to give a person a look. You know, just that look. This is my boundary. You don't cross it. Neither of us wants you to cross it. Now, that only works if you own the ability to follow through with that threat, right? So it can be not a big, scary, awful threat, but just enough to let a person know where your boundary is, but you do have to be willing to defend it. If they cross the boundary, you need to be so comfortable with your own ability to create a little havoc in somebody else's life that you will rise up and make them stop. You have to be able to back it up. If you can't back it up, the threat doesn't mean anything. But if you can back it up, you won't need to back it up. And people will treat you with more dignity and respect. So that is the healing and the description of hot and cold anger. I hope that it's useful and valuable. Joy exploring what those angry feelings are and where their sources are. And as the source of the anger rises to the surface of conscious awareness, you will find that the solution rises with it. So good luck, everybody. If you have any questions or comments, you can put them in the comment section below. Thank you for being with me, and I will do another video soon.